Milwaukee Public Television is proud to present Next Avenue Community Conversations. Next Avenue brings baby boomers and beyond smart, useful information and compelling perspectives. Our goal is simple: to provide provocative information that makes your life more meaningful and enjoyable. Next Avenue is made possible by the Helen Daniels Bader Fund, a Bader philanthropy with a focus on Alzheimer's disease and healthier older adults. On this episode, how to protect yourself from financial predators. There are criminals who are trying to steal your money, your identity, your history. They try to get you through your computer, your phone, the mail, or even your front door. We are coming to you from the beautiful facilities of the South Shore Yacht Club in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now here's your host, Mark Siegriest.
You know, as baby boomers, we need to do a lot better job of hanging on to our money. Foolish spending isn't really the problem here. It's falling victim to financial predators at the front door, through the mail, over the telephone, over the internet. They love to target a generation because they feel, among other things, we have the financial means. We also can be quite gullible, forgetful, easily distracted. We certainly aren't the only audience being targeted on this. It's estimated that every year in the U.S., tens of billions, that's with a B, dollars a year are lost to financial scams. So in that regard, and if we're talking about it on a global perspective, it runs into the hundreds of billions of dollars. So obviously the FBI is looking into this very seriously, has a lot of tools at its disposal, is prioritizing the job of stopping the financial predators through a variety of means. Among them, one of their biggest tools right now is creating greater awareness. Well, Clayton Wible is a special agent based in the Milwaukee Bureau. He's here with us tonight. His day job involves heading up the distinguished white-collar crime unit here in Milwaukee, and he's here this evening to share some vital information with all of us. So let's make Clayton feel welcome. Thank you so much for being with us here tonight, sir. It's a pleasure to have you with us. We're at the South Shore Yacht Club. This is a great crowd. This is a great place for conversation. And this is a fascinating yet tragic topic. I mean, what kind of characters are we talking about? Where do they get their expertise? Where do they come from? How young are they? Help us better understand this.
I think probably every aspect of them runs the gambit. They're of different ages. Some of them have, in essence, been at this as their profession. Some may be dabbling in it. We have had some investigations dealing with college students. We've had investigations dealing with much older perpetrators or subjects. And the training runs the gamut too. A lot of them are self-taught. A lot of them have a formal education behind them. A lot of them may just come from the street of hard knocks, if you will.
Mm-hmm. And how do they break into this crime? I mean, what's the starting point for them?
For everybody, it's a little bit different. For some people, everything in life has maybe not gone their way, and I don't say that as justification for it, but just as some background for it. And so they're left with what they feel are relatively few means at their disposal to make money, which at the end of the day makes the world go round. And so they've got to do what they feel they need to do to make ends meet.
Are they working solo, or is this a coordinated effort?
A little bit of both.
Okay.
There are individuals that coordinate with each other and work as a team, if you will, or share information, regrettably share victims from one time to the next. And there are individuals who go through this process and just do business, if you will, all by themselves.
Now, we're talking about scam artists sharing information, contact data, financial information. Are they doing it among their own groups of friends, of colleagues, or are they throwing it out there for general consumption?
They're doing it generally among their own groups of like-minded subjects or like-minded perpetrators. And in essence, it amounts to a suckers list, that if you've fallen for scheme A, there might be the chance that you'd fall for scheme B. And so they will either share or sell these lists between one another.
Okay, and how well coordinated is the guy who goes, or woman who goes door to door, sends some sort of a scheme through the mail or over the telephone or in person? Is it coordinated in that regard, or are there areas of special, quote-unquote, expertise?
I think there's probably some areas of special expertise, and more that comes from, in my opinion, interpersonal skills than anything else. The scheme itself is probably relatively easily learned, but the old notion of someone being a con man, right, or a confidence man, that's how it works. They've got to get the confidence of the person that eventually falls victim to that and convince that person that what they're selling, what they're promoting, what they're offering is the next new way to make money.
But even though there's confidence built in going door to door, talking over the telephone, or to some degree over the internet, it's somewhat a different skill that is required to write something up that goes through the mail or goes on the internet.
Absolutely.
That way. I mean, eye-to-eye contact is a different skill set than verbal or even written. So how does that break out? I mean, how is that work divided up among those who are involved in this?
Well, it's a little different for what your skill set is, right? But then again, it's harder to slam the door on someone, shut the door on someone's face while they're talking to you than it is to just tear up the letter, right? So the people that are, from what I've seen, people a little more gregarious, a little more affable, those may well be the people that end up on your doorstep or speaking to you on the telephone because they have that ability to carry on the conversation, and despite your protests, despite you saying, you know, I really need to leave and get back inside and start making dinner or whatever the situation might be, they're undeterred by that, and they'll stick with it and attempt to wear you down.
So there's some salesmanship in this. I mean, we're talking about exceptional sales skills.
They're selling a scheme, they're selling a fraud, but they're still selling it.
Clayton and his colleagues in the Bureau have come up with a classic list of come-ons of financial schemes, and you shared them with me a moment ago. There's like the top 6 or the top 8, if you will. Right. Could you run them down for us and explain to us how they work?
Sure. Some of them, and I'm not speaking ill of any dating sites, for example, but there have been instances in which someone has been defrauded through online dating, be it within the continental U.S. or internationally. And frequently, the relationship does not have a face-to-face meeting occur during it. There may be pictures that are exchanged through the online dating site, but of course, right, you need to be wary of that because I could send you any picture of me that may or may not bear any resemblance to what I am. And so they again gain your confidence that way, and there's a lot of discussion, frequently is discussion that comes around to, gosh, I'd really like to come visit you in your country, or get a bigger apartment so that you can come to my country and live with me. And they make the offer that they've accumulated the cash necessary to travel, and then, surprise, surprise, something bad will happen. They'll have a hospital stay, they'll have an unexpected expense, and all the money that they claim to have raised to pay for the travel to the U.S. will then be diverted to cover some other cost. And the whole time, they're preying on the victim's heartstrings, and you know, they express a real desire to come to the States to see them, and it'll take me a long time to build up that money again. We're going to be together eventually. You and I are compatible. Why don't you loan me the money now? And that'll get me over to the States that much quicker.
So actually what they're doing is they're working on a couple of different emotions here. They're looking on the promise of romance, and they're looking at sympathy, because if they're going through some hard times themselves, I mean, they're hoping that you're going to feel sorry for them and you'll invest in their future. Now, does this scheme occur over the internet? Does it come through the mail? Does it come through the telephone? I mean, is this a multimedia approach? Different platforms, or
mostly through the internet and maybe some telephone.
Okay.
And a lot of people will realize only after the fact the total amount of money that they've sent, because the money will be asked for. $200 here, $300 there, $100 there. But it goes on for months and months and months. And by the time you add all that money up, right, you've bought 2 round-trip first-class tickets as compared to what it would simply cost bare bones for that person really to come to the U.S.
They got you. You're on the hook.
So I don't say that badly about any particular internet dating site. I don't say it about internet dating sites in general. But people need to be cognizant of what the relationship really is and what's being asked of them as part of that relationship.
And it all starts when you're going fishing, when you think you're on a legitimate dating service. And okay,
absolutely.
Another one.
Another one may be getting a random check in the mail, typically associated with a letter or comes with a letter inside it. And the letter has, for lack of a better way to describe it, maybe a down in your luck, sad sack sort of story about how the individual is having a difficult time establishing a bank account at any financial institution. And so they're looking for help from you to help out your fellow man, cash the check that's in the envelope, and offer that you can keep 50%, 75% of it. They just need some cash. So if you'd please deposit this and then write a check out for the balance and send it to such and such an address, I'd be very grateful. Well, it's only after you've written the check for $50, $100, $200, whatever it might be, that the bank gets back around to letting you know that that check is not a valid check, and now you're simply out the money.
Wow. Wow. All right, keep going. We're interested here. You got us.
FBI, IRS, right? Unless you clear up this arrest warrant, unless you clear up this debt, unless you clear up this delinquent tax issue, we're going to come and arrest you. Right? Have people heard about that one over the phone? Typically over the phone, sometimes through the mail. I can offer you, certainly for the FBI, and I don't want to be so bold as to speak for my colleagues at the IRS, but I can say that that's not how either of those agencies do business, right? The FBI, generally speaking, doesn't tell you when you have an arrest warrant, and we don't clear things up by getting paid. That's one of the things we investigate, ironically enough.
So this is pretty heavy-handed. I mean, this isn't a romantic come-on. This isn't hoping that you feel sorry for me when going through some hard luck. This is an out-and-out threat.
Correct.
Threatening that, to move forward if you're not going to pay up.
Correct. Misusing our good name to extort someone, in essence, to paying what they think is some arrest record or some delinquent issue that they were unaware of.
Could you give us one more? These are classics.
Let's see.
The Ponzi scheme is still in play, is it not?
Absolutely it is. And it comes in different forms. It's presented different ways. The background story is different. But Ponzi scheme investment fraud is regrettably alive and well.
It's still the last person kicking in is feeding the first person
supporting the people getting
stepped
out.
up. Right. Yeah.
And generally speaking, what it costs the subject frequently is maybe emails. Right? You can do all that at home while you're having your cup of coffee in the morning. So really the amount of time, if you view that as your profession, if that's what you do for a living, is get money out of people via a scheme, that really costs you nothing to sit at your computer and send out emails.
Now, Clayton, you and your colleagues are interviewing victims all the time. And you must be hearing some tragic stories. What are they telling you? I mean, how did they get suckered in like this?
A lot of people are in a difficult financial position, and they think they're intrigued by it, and they think to themselves, this is maybe not their chance to get ahead, but it's their chance to balance the ship and to right the ship. And you never blame the victim, right? They might have made some different financial choices in their life that might have caused things to turn out better for them, but ultimately they're behind the curve on it financially, and this is their chance to sort of catch up for that lost ground, is how frequently many people.
It's almost like the mentality one brings to the betting table.
Yes, a little bit.
I think just if I do well once or twice, I'll be okay.
Exactly. And some people, I've had victims tell me stories about how they've been trying to catch up on savings accounts for their grandchildren's college funds. So a lot of people have lost their own personal life savings trying to provide for others in their family, for the next generation in their family.
Typically, how do you even start an investigation? I mean, what's your first step? You get the call, you're contacted, and I mean, is it a combination of footwork, going on the internet yourself? How do you track them down?
It's a little bit of everything. And at the end of the day, one of the biggest things we have at our disposal is, generally speaking, people are still comfortable and confident in talking to the FBI. And so we use that to the best of our advantage and go out and talk to witnesses and talk to people that have absolutely no criminal issues, but have some information to provide that will help paint a fuller picture of what the scheme is.
I mean, in the end, do you have to go to a judge, get a warrant, search the premises of someone's workspace, and what do you find? What do you find there? What does it look like?
Generally speaking, you find a lot of form letters talking about how that person's balance has increased, and of course, there is no balance, right? But it costs the subject very little to keep bumping up the proposed investment balance every time and sending out a monthly letter to the victims or the investors to make them keep thinking that it's working, that their investment is growing, and that they've made the right choice. And frequently, those same victims are given the chance by the subject that, gosh, Clay, you could pull your money out now, but why do that when you can leave it in and grow more money? Right?
University of Phoenix, and my colleague Dan Jones shared this information with me, and Clayton, you and I were talking about it, has just finished up work with Harris Poll, the Harris Poll people, conducting a survey of about 2,000 consumers across the country regarding their perception of internet crime and regarding their personal knowledge of it, their first-hand experiences. And you read this statistic, and you say that you and your colleagues seem this is pretty much right on. According to their findings to this poll, 43% of those folks surveyed indicated they have had a personal experience of their own with a security breach. That does not surprise you. I mean, that's happening out there.
Absolutely, it is.
Now, the statistic from that poll that really intrigued me was 37% supposedly of all security breaches that occur in various sectors on the internet or financial information as a whole occurs within the healthcare industry. And I remember as a reporter years ago when the HIPAA laws were enacted, took effect, I mean, there was a lot of, attention paid that, well, we've got these federal laws in place. Folks are not going to, folks need not fear talking with their physician or their insurance company about their different healthcare background. It's secure. And now we learn that the healthcare industry is suffering one of the most frequent security breaches of any other industry. How does that happen?
I think the internet and the criminals, as a result of exploiting the internet, have made the world a very small place. And people's healthcare information and their personal identifying information continues to be of an increasing value to those criminal elements.
And you were telling me that the information that someone loses to a scam regarding their health history is some of the most vital information that they could lose.
Correct, and it's valued by those same criminal elements at a higher value than the information that might be used or might be needed to open, say, a credit card.
Why is my healthcare information so valuable?
Just because it travels with you, and it's more encompassing and more descriptive of you as a human being.
Such as, I mean, beyond my age, beyond my health history.
Really, all of it put together.
Really?
It's the complete package.
It's really the broadest information set that we contribute to.
Correct.
Some helpful tips. What should we be aware of when we're surfing the internet at night after dinner in our home office, in our dens, whatever? We're paying a bill or two online, and we're communicating with folks, and maybe we're in a chat room, whatever. What should we be mindful of, and how can we better protect ourselves, Clayton?
I'd say one of the basic things you can do is have a good, strong password. And change it not so frequently that you lose track of what the password is, but change it on a regular basis, right? Have your password not just be the minimum amount of characters needed, have it be a little longer than that, have it contain some numbers, maybe some capitalization, have it contain a unique character such as an exclamation point or a $sign.
So really mix it up.
Yes, absolutely. And right, I know what I'm saying. Most people need another password like they need a hole in their head. Right? That's one of the worlds that I operate in. I'm familiar with that, but that's one of the easiest and most straightforward ways to protect your information.
What else should we be doing? Before I move on to that question, where should we keep all of our password information for our own memories?
Well, I don't promote one over any other, but there are different forms of, in essence, digital vaults, a digital way by which you secure or track your passwords. Of course, then you have to remember the password to that, right? A lot of people write them down in some sort of cryptic fashion that's meaningful to you. And while I don't necessarily promote that, in order for someone to get the passwords and exploit them, they would have to have broken into your house and know where that particular piece of paper is, and then be able to decipher or decode it. So, for a lot of people, that works.
Okay. I would love to get you ready for some questions?
Absolutely.
I think we've got a lot of questions out there. Raise your hands if you have a question for Clayton, and we can get going on getting now, don't be shy. You're sailors here. You're sailors, you're boaters. You've got a lot of curiosity. Who has a question here for our special agent? Yes, sir. We'll get a microphone to you. Go right ahead.
What about a password-protected Excel worksheet with your passwords?
That would work great. Absolutely. It's all a matter of whatever works for you, right? Because all these digital password vaults and things like that, if you're not going to use them, then why invest in that? So that'd be a great idea.
What is the biggest mistake we make during our financial transactions?
Probably presuming there's more security than maybe there really is in online banking. Right? I do online banking, so I'm not throwing stones at it. But maybe the notion of signing up for two-factor authentication. And what that means, for those of you that might be unfamiliar, is that you would need your password to get into your online banking, and you'd also need your cell phone, which would get texted a code from your bank. So what's the likelihood that the bad guy would have both your phone to request something from the bank as far as a passcode to come up and your password, right? So that's, again, it's a little bit of additional burden on you to use your computer and get into your banking, but in order to protect your financial assets, that's probably time well spent.
Yeah. And we have a question way in the back. Yes, sir.
Yes, you spoke earlier of the sucker lists, and there's data brokers out there who sell vast, assortments of legitimate data. I'm wondering if there's also an international market for sucker lists being sold, in which case once you got on one of those, you would just be besieged by con men from all over the place.
Yes, there is, and you've captured it quite well. I've talked to people before that have fallen victim to, say, the Canadian lottery or Irish lottery. And once they fell victim to it the first time, they learned their lesson, either on their own or with the intervention of law enforcement of some sort, but they keep getting phone calls, allegedly from different countries with different lotteries, hoping that they might fall victim to it again.
And it's not uncommon to get the same call, same time of night, every evening from the same business. I mean, it's like the Energizer Bunny. They just keep coming at you.
Absolutely. And I can speak for myself. The way we handle it at home is we let the answering machine get it, right?
Sure.
And it's no fun if the other party won't play. So if I don't pick up the phone, they've got nothing to ask me about.
And yes, sir. We have a question from you.
One of the greatest difficulties of our age is keeping up with computers in general, because we didn't grow up with them. When they do things like upgrade the entire platforms, like now they're doing Windows 10, sure, and you have to get all your stuff up to it, what makes me crazy is then most of my stuff doesn't work, the peripherals don't work, and you have to go on the internet to get a fix, and you don't know if the person fixing it, who takes control of your computer and gets your credit card, is legit.
Sure, absolutely. A couple suggestions on that, and I believe it would probably be a relatively minor expenditure, is maybe go to the local tech store, right, and hire someone of your choosing. Look through the Better Business Bureau and maybe identify a tech company nearby that can, now granted there'd be a little expenditure in order to hire those people, but for peace of mind, again, that might be worth it. Maybe an after-hours class through adult education. That might be another way to gain your own skills.
And we have another question coming in, I think, from the center of the room. And microphone's being passed down. Yes, sir.
Credit card fraud. They advertise on TV to buy a packet that you can put your credit card in, because someone walking by you with some kind of control device can actually get a hold of your credit card number. Is that a fact? Or?
That technology exists for the subjects to do that. I don't know how effective some of the preventative measures are. One of the good things about credit cards is that the credit card companies are very cooperative with their card holders, and they work very hard to recover on their own the money that comes about from fraudulent charges, right? You have to let them know it's a fraudulent charge that you didn't make, but generally they're very cooperative with you.
Yes, and I think, do we have another question from that corner of the room? Maybe we have another one coming up. Identity theft, worst possible scenario?
Worst possible scenario, you spend the rest of your life proving that you're who you say you are and not the other person.
What happens? I mean, when it's obvious to you that, someone has assumed my identity and is spending wildly, I mean, how do you even begin to capture it?
You have to start from the ground up. Now, there are credit unions and, of course, your bank or your credit card holder will help you with that. But the sad part is when you go to get a car loan, when you get a home loan, when you get a signature loan, almost anything, a credit card application, you are already anticipating having to pull out the affidavits that you've used in the past to, in essence, relive your victimization of how your identity was stolen and convince yet another credit facility that you're who you really say you are.
Mm-hmm. Don't keep large amount of money on your debit card, for one thing.
Correct.
And when you're paying online, never use your debit card.
Correct.
And the reason for that is?
As I responded to the gentleman earlier, credit cards are more cooperative and they have a finite purpose to them, right? That's to accumulate charges, not to pay instantly for things like a debit card does. So in a worst case scenario, if someone has your debit card and is able to exploit it for long enough, that's connected typically to your checking account, which means they have access to whatever remains in your checking account.
Now, even though you and your colleagues are working hard here out of the Milwaukee Bureau, we're really talking about a global issue. I mean, how connected are we in these schemes on a global basis?
Well, it's a very small world, right? The internet has proven that, continues to prove it time and time again. And that same behavior is being seen through the subjects. So you could just as easily, someone could attempt to victimize you that lives down the street from you. More likely they live across the globe from you, just because it's easy enough for them to do that now. As the director, I think, put it, it used to be that you'd have to go to the bank to rob it. Now, you can defraud the bank while you're drinking coffee and sitting at home on your computer.
And I would love to talk to you about the classic, we're holding your grandchild hostage here, but first I want to take a question from my colleague Maureen. Maureen, you have a question for our guest. Go ahead.
So nowadays we're asked to give our Social Security number to almost every place. You know, your utility company, your stores, everyone wants your employer, doctors, dentists. I'm told that they go in and they buy lists of people at medical offices, dental offices, and as long as they have the name, the birth date, and the Social Security number, now they have your identity. They can file a tax return before you do, claiming any amount of money and get returns. They make a lot of money doing this. Is there a way to protect your Social Security number when it's used so broadly in today's world?
There's not a good answer to that. I think it's become, I don't want to say no, but it's becoming increasingly more difficult for the exact reasons that you mentioned, right? So for some of us that started using your Social Security number for your test grades in junior high or high school and on up through college, that's what I remember about it, or the last 4 digits of it maybe. And now it's almost synonymous with your name as an identifying bit of information. So I think probably one of the best ways that you can keep checking on that is to get a free credit report from a credit union or credit bureau every year. And ultimately, there's 3 credit bureaus, which means you could get 3 free credit reports every year, just one from each of the 3 bureaus.
Different layers. Maureen, did that cover your question? Did you have a follow-up? Okay.
I mean, there are ways that I decline to give my Social Security number at most places. I just decline it. I leave it blank. If they ask for it, I say I don't think it's necessary.
Absolutely, and that's a balancing choice for everybody, right? The world's become a small place. I know I keep harping on that, but it's true. And so it is not as necessary for the subjects or the bad guys to dig through your recycling or your trash or steal your mail like they used to, because they can pay for a short amount of time for a public information database and get that same information about people. Now, granted, they're using it for nefarious purposes, but they're obtaining the information legally. So everybody sort of has to decide for themselves how much dedication and effort they put into protecting their own identity, right? Do you shred every bit of mail you get, or do you tear it in half?
I've become rather obsessive about shredding. I spend a lot of time just shredding.
No, I'm not dismissing.
But I mean, it's amazing what people just leave out in their trash.
Yes, that continues to, right? There's no need to make it any easier for the subjects.
Absolutely. This gentleman has a question. Yes, sir.
When you use your cell phone to pay a bill, is it more likely that if you use it as an email function versus a verbal function. In other words, they say, you know, what is your credit card number? And you're in a restaurant or whatever. Nobody's listening, but you give your credit card information out. Right. Is that a more dangerous thing than just trying to use it as an email or a text?
I would say unlikely, because whoever might be listening to you is going to have to be ready to write all those numbers down in the right order, and so they'll have to be tracking your conversation well enough to know when to listen and when to get their pen out. And typically, once you get to the point of providing, let's say not verbally, but providing it by pushing the correct buttons and representing it digitally on whatever site you're going to, it's probably reached some sort of secure server at that point, secure data exchange.
Well, more specifically, can they intercept your phone call and listen to you? That's what I would be worried about, you know.
Absolutely.
Unlikely.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, just verbally, we're giving out all kinds of information during a conversation with someone we're doing business with.
If they're at the level where they're trying to get simply, in quotes, your credit card number, they're probably not at a level they would need to be to intercept a telephone call.
But you're not a big fan of Wi-Fi. The neighbor next door could be certainly following our conversation. Absolutely. On the internet.
And if you do have a Wi-Fi at home, please lock it down, right? Put a password on it, because we have had enforcement actions in the past where we went to house A, and at first you think it's a story when they say that wasn't me, I didn't do that on my Wi-Fi. Well, we find out it's a neighbor that piggybacked onto your Wi-Fi and was using it for illegal purposes.
Wow. I think we had a question there in the middle. Yes, sir.
Hi. This is not an FBI matter, but I have a relative who is very sick and really needs some home health care. Yes. And I said, well, why don't you approach and get some service that will come in and give a health care worker, you know, to help you out. But she says, oh no, I've had a lot of friends that have that. Somebody comes in, they say, well, this family has a lot of money, maybe I'll take a little bit. How do I assure her that it's really important for her well-being to try to get some help?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think I'd say probably have a trusted friend or a trusted family member do some research in that field, and maybe start talking to her primary care physician. While that physician is unlikely to recommend a particular company over others, he or she might be in a position to give a choice of companies that they've maybe done business with or have had patients who have done business with over the years.
You know, but how much are we really? I want to talk about the social media and how it's made the world a smaller place on the internet, and we're sharing a lot of information about our personal life. But we share a lot of information about our personal lives in the normal lunchroom. Here at South Shore, we could be having a business lunch.
Sure.
And we're in the middle of the room, and we're talking about something that we did today. We closed a deal or whatever. How much information are we freely giving or sharing with people around us during a normal business day, and how mindful should we be, especially in the times we live in, that people are listening and that people have cell phones, mm-hmm. and that everything, we're all public people now because they can snap a picture of us doing anything, anywhere, at any time. Right. How mindful should we be about people just listening in on our conversations, maybe in the next table?
I would encourage people to be aware of their surroundings and be aware of the people around them, right? I'm not indicating that you should ask for ID from the people that you're having dinner with if you've just met them, right? You really ought to continue to live life and enjoy life.
But are times different in that regard?
Yes, I think absolutely they are. That's one of the age-old questions of, is the world getting worse, or is it getting better, is it staying the same? I don't know. There's a lot of people that say it's become a more immediate news world than it used to be, and so maybe we just know more that's going on. Maybe the world hasn't changed. Maybe we just know more about what's going on in the world. So I would encourage you to be cognizant of what you're saying and what you're sharing, because generally we're social creatures. When you get on a roll with somebody you've met, you tend to share information, everybody to a different degree. But I just would encourage people to be mindful of what they're saying and in what context they're saying it.
If our lives are being too routine, if we walk down the street on a Saturday morning, every Saturday morning at 8:30 to buy a newspaper, get a cup of coffee, blah, 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 whatever it is, should we even be mindful about becoming too regular in our daily lives, too predictable?
I would give some thought to becoming too predictable in your patterns. Right? There's not that many of us who are vulnerable to kidnappings for ransom just because we're sitting on a large sum of money or have access to vast sums of money. But it's probably not a bad idea to vary your schedule a little bit from time to time.
Which brings me to another one of the nasty schemes that you're mindful of. The classic case of contacting a grandparent saying, we got your grandchild, there's such and such a place, we want money for it, and more times than not, they know your personal life because they love reading about all your stories on your social media account.
Absolutely, and there's no telling why they might have identified you as a potential victim, but likely they've done their homework and they know your family structure, know whose parents go with what child, and are able to use that in a convincing manner. I've encouraged people that I've talked to in the past who are grandparents to maybe buy a little time, and during that time that they've bought, so to speak, from the alleged kidnappers, call your son, call your daughter, call your grandchild, and find out once and for all what the story is. Are they in a foreign country, or are they still at the university, pursuing their studies? And at that point, then I wouldn't bother to engage the kidnappers, the alleged kidnappers anymore.
Are you a believer in social media, and what do you not put out there about your,
I'm pretty stingy on social media. I don't have a Facebook page. That's more my personality, so I don't engage in that. I remind people, everybody's heard this before, but once it's out there, right? You can't take it back off the internet. There's always going to be a trace of it somewhere.
Yeah, it's interesting. Other questions in the audience? Yes. Retired Professor Wayne Youngquist, former Channel 12 analyst and retired teacher at UW-Whitewater. Good to have you with us, my friend.
That's a longer introduction than what I'm going to ask.
And you're well worth it, sir.
Ponzi schemes are fascinating. We get reports, one was $62 billion. Others are smaller amounts but are widespread. What can people do to protect themselves, to be aware of what they might be getting caught up in a Ponzi scheme, and how can they protect themselves against it?
Sure. It sounds simplistic because it is, but it works, right? Just a few principles. If it sounds too good to be true, it is, right? Everybody could say that with me probably, but that's true. So very high risk or very high reward, what does that also bring with it automatically? Very high risk, right? You can't have a legitimate high return, no risk investment. It doesn't work that way. Talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your neighbors. Everybody probably has or has access to a financial advisor. Ask him or her, right? Run the scenario by them. And while not everybody has formal training, formal education in finances, if you can't yourself understand in general how the process is supposed to make money, right, there may be a problem with it. Everybody essentially understands the stock market. Right? Not with the subtle nuances that a trader might, but in general, everybody understands how that works. I've talked to a lot of Ponzi scheme victims, a lot of investment fraud victims who at the time understood the story and the picture that was being painted by the subject, and then afterwards were at an absolute loss to provide me with any explanation of how it was supposed to work or how it was supposed to make money, just because at that point, the story no longer made sense to them.
So why did they even move forward? If they didn't understand it, why did they buy into it?
Well, some people thought this was their chance to get something for nothing, quite frankly, right?
Faith.
So
Just blind faith.
Greed is a little part of it. Faith is a little part of it. Faith in your fellow man. A lot of them knew, maybe not as a close personal friend, but a lot of them knew the subject. And so they thought, well, I've been doing business with Clay for X number of years. Why would he steer me wrong now?
Did that answer your question, Wayne?
Yeah, of course we have Ponzi scheme in the news.
Yes.
news here in Milwaukee right now. But that gets at the idea. Yes, thank you very much.
And it's, you know, no matter, you know, average people, right up to, obviously, by virtue of the stories I've been reading lately, CEOs of companies can fall victim to this. So one's intelligence or level of business or financial knowledge really doesn't necessarily keep them from buying into something that looks too good to be true.
No, absolutely. I've had victims who had formal financial planning, training, education, and that was their profession, and they fell victim to Ponzi schemes, investment fraud schemes.
Oh, absolutely amazing. Other questions from the audience here? You folks are doing a great job here in moving the conversation along. I think, have someone there in the middle? No? We're okay? When you sit down, when you get a chance to go eyeball to eyeball with someone that you know, you've caught them, they're on the verge of admitting it, then they do admit it, and then you begin to pick their brain. What in the hell are they telling you? I mean, what was their motivation? How did they do it? Where did the thrill come? I mean, what is it like?
Greed is the biggest part of it, right?
Are they arrogant, or are they?
Typically, they think they're the smartest person in the room,
really?
No matter who else is in the room. Frequently, they think that. Frequently, they have whatever their professional field is. They have a business that's doing well, and they're making a good living already.
So this is a side job many times.
Exactly, and there's really, aside from wanting more things in life, there's really no need for them to do it because they were more than capable of making ends meet as it was.
And are they proud? When they've scored a big one? I mean, is that a feather in their cap? Is there a lot of professional pride in what they do, or
there certainly is a sense of accomplishment, and for a lot of them, no matter what devices, no matter what evidence you choose to confront them with or use to confront them with and disprove their theory, a lot of them, after they've sort of told themselves the lie so many times out loud, they believe it just as much as their victims did.
In this kind of white-collar crime, is there much remorse, or is there remorse when one gets caught?
There's a lot of remorse when one gets caught. There are people that have genuine remorse that life dealt them a series of blows, and again, that maybe was the way that they thought was their last resort to keep going. And there are a lot of people that are genuinely very regretful about the choices they made and what they did to others. And there's probably an equal or greater number that are regretful simply because they got caught.
And I know how hard you and your colleagues in the Bureau work at your craft and pursue these investigations. I mean, you got to put one piece in place after another before you can even point a finger and get a successful warrant and go in and collect the evidence. I mean, how tedious is it? This is tough police work, is it not?
Absolutely. It's sort of building the house brick by brick, and it can be, I understand that it can be very frustrating on the victim side of things when they feel as though the investigation is not proceeding, right? The notion that the wheels of justice turn, but they turn slowly. And that's true, particularly true on some white-collar or financial fraud investigations.
When you get these folks, how long are they going away for? I mean, how serious is the crime?
Well, Bernie Madoff, right? It all depends on how the sentencing goes. Right, so that's really just too broad a scale.
And do you ever ask them?
It all depends.
Did you ever ask them? You were mentioning that some of these folks are freelancing beyond a regular 9-to-5 job that they have. If they put this skill set, applied it toward a legitimate business, they would do quite well. So why work the dark side?
Absolutely.
What do they say to that?
It comes back to. It just was for some people, it's sort of a rush for them, right? And that doesn't make it right, but that's for some people, that's their perspective on it.
And when we're talking about white-collar crime, it's a different mentality than homicide or burglary. I mean, this is a different kind of criminal mentality.
Absolutely, and we're getting away from it a little bit, but there are still people out there that view it as a victimless crime. Right?
Okay.
The notion of people having to go back to work after they've been retired because they've lost their life savings, right? That's lost on the subject. That's the result that his or her actions are having on people.
But a lot of ego. This form of crime,
Absolutely.
There's a lot of ego. Interesting. Yes, sir. Question.
Yes, what can we as potential marks, when we're contacted by some schemer, what can we do to help you catch the bad guys? Is there some, should we call the police or the Business Bureau or the FBI? You know, what can we do to help get these guys behind bars?
Absolutely. I would call maybe first your local law enforcement. We are happy to hear from everybody, right? The problem comes that we, just as any other law enforcement agency, have limited resources, right? We might have more than others, but our resources and our personnel are limited as well. So we have to make certain cutoffs in what we take on as investigations and what we don't. But people are welcome to call the FBI office. People are welcome to call local law enforcement. As far as maybe what you should do, I encourage people not to try to be a junior G-man or an investigator because, right, it's well-intentioned, but they're better at that game than you are. And so you may well end up during the discussion that you're trying to tease information out of them, right? It turns around and you end up giving more information than you're getting and are getting back. And of course, once you've said it out loud, it's already out there for the subject. So I would say don't engage them and call law enforcement.
And we have another question in the back. And John, you're just about there with, here we go. Yes, sir.
My wife receives these letters from lotteries in Europe, Spain and Portugal.
Yes.
Should she turn these letters over to the post office or just shred them?
I would shred them, quite frankly. And of course, right, one of the simple things on that is you can't win a lottery you didn't enter. So it's pretty simple logic, but people frequently have lost sight of that notion. So I would say probably just shred them. If you want to turn them in, law enforcement agencies, post office, probably would not decline accepting them. But generally, it's a made-up name in a foreign country, and so there's relatively little that law enforcement can do with the information.
Now, you mentioned earlier, I'm sorry, you have another question, sir. Go right ahead.
Once these perpetrators are caught, do you feel that the judicial system is backing you and helping you with the appropriate punishments, or are they just kind of whitewashing it and letting them go?
Well, I don't think they're whitewashing it. Every judge, for whatever reason, has his or her own criteria for how they sentence, right? Society, I'm thankful that in my time in the Bureau, society has taken steps towards realizing that these aren't victimless crimes, right? You don't just go out and reaccumulate all the wealth you've acquired. And I'm not speaking vast sums of money. I'm talking about the typical person, typical American. They're realizing now that it's not that easy to go back to work and recover from one of these losses. And so sentencing guidelines have changed, and the judges are, in my opinion, handing out stiffer sentences to white-collar criminals than they used to.
And we're living in a different age, and we're living in a different age of federal investigative talent and powers. And, you know, we were talking about this earlier. In the old days, if you were applying for a job, investigative job with the FBI, if you had a degree in accounting, chances are you're going to have a pretty good chance of landing the job. But your agency is looking at a much broader skill set right now. Tell us about that.
Absolutely.
I mean, just to face this variety of crimes that we are today.
Absolutely. We would routinely hire CPAs, people who are educated and trained in accounting, and attorneys. And while everybody is a unique individual, we had a special agent workforce of people with roughly the same background and the same set of experiences. And so we quickly realized that wasn't giving us a very diverse look at the world. And so we started diversifying and started hiring people with a broader background. And certainly coming to the Bureau now, it expands even further. But we had my background in biology. We had a dance choreographer. We had a fellow that sold high-end kitchen equipment to restaurants. air traffic controllers. And so really, pretty much you name it, and you can find somebody in the Bureau with that as their pre-FBI work experience.
You're recruiting the face of America, both in occupation, cultural background, whatever. I mean,
every aspect.
And that obviously is geared towards being able to talk with and investigate America.
Absolutely, and understand it. Right? We're a diverse country, and so we recognize the need to be a diverse workforce.
Yes, ma'am, you have a question.
Hi, I'm just wondering what the general demographic is of the offenders that we've been referencing today.
It's a very small snapshot of the world, so let me caveat it by saying that, okay? Generally, I would say older white males, probably middle-aged white males, and that's really through the lens of my work experience.
So what you're saying is I would fit into your composite picture.
I didn't want to come right out and say it. But frankly, I'm getting to that point as well. So.
All right. Who else have a question? Yes. You have been a wonderful audience. What is this? You are involved in a fascinating occupation. How different are your days? And if we were to follow you and your colleagues pursuing these different cases, we'd see you out in public. We'd see you using technical tools. What would a typical day be like for you?
Our biggest strength remains being able to talk with people and having the confidence of the public. Every day, right? We tend to say that every day holds the possibility of being a little different, just because certainly very necessary but unexpected situations can come up that call for you to drop whatever you're doing because the unexpected response is of a greater need. But interviewing people, right? Sometimes subjects, sometimes people that simply have a little nugget of information to provide.
How willing are people, whether they're victims or whether they're someone who may be aware of what's going on next door, how, we hear in terms of the relationship between local police departments in this country and the immediate neighborhood. Sometimes the communication, the relationship is not that good, not that trusting. But when you're investigating at your level as a federal agent and you go into a neighborhood, how willing are people to share information with you?
Thankfully, people remain very willing, and I don't say that with any disrespect or any loss to any other law enforcement agency, but we continue to enjoy, I think, a well-deserved but a hard-earned reputation amongst the community as people that will maintain their confidence as a professional law enforcement agency, and we reap the benefits of that.
And financial perpetrators, predators can be quite elusive, and sometimes hard to catch. It's very tedious work. What's the biggest challenge of pursuing these kinds of cases? The biggest frustration that you run into?
Probably what one human being will do to another over some money. Frankly, that's the biggest disappointment that I'll speak for myself that I've seen.
And how sophisticated has this trade become, this criminal trade? I mean, what's down the road? What do you see coming? What do you see as the biggest challenge for consumers as Main Street continues to move into the internet?
I think that captures it exactly, that the cyber world and the internet are going to continue to impact an ever-increasing portion of life, and certainly almost every aspect of the violations that we handle.
Yeah. And when we get that annoying call, you told us earlier that use of an answering machine is the best tool, but if we mistakenly pick up the phone thinking it's someone down the street, a friend or a relative, and we're engaged in the conversation, what should our demeanor be? Because I would assume one of the worst things that could happen would be we'd become angry by the exchange and we'd start sharing information that is helping the person who's trying to trap us.
Absolutely.
What should our demeanor be, and what's the best way to get rid of the call?
I would say calm, and the way that I present it is I tell whoever's on the other end of the phone, be it someone I think might not be legitimate or a representative of an organization that I know to be legitimate, I tell them that I don't do business over the phone. And if they'd like to send me something in the mail, that'd be great.
And to what degree should we ask the question so as to, if we're concerned enough about what's going on here, perhaps we've been getting these calls on a frequent basis, should we engage in questioning ourselves to help put an end to it? You mentioned earlier that it's a big mistake to be a junior agent, but how can we better assist?
I think probably by just heading it off at its pass, and if it's something that you think is a fraudulent offer, just don't engage with it. Right? Don't be part of it. Yeah. That's probably one of the easiest ways. And if it really is truly legitimate and someone truly is seeking out your business, chances are they will recontact you or contact you using a different platform, as you mentioned earlier.
And based on your experience, your daily contact with this criminal trade, how has this changed your own, I mean, without getting into specifics, sure. How has this changed your own daily life in terms of, your financial affairs, the public nature of your life? I mean, how has this really educated you into being a better consumer?
Well, that's one of the reasons that I choose to put relatively little on social media, right? Because you can't get it back. And while I don't feel as though I am a particular target as a result of my job, there's probably somebody out there that doesn't care for the FBI and may well know who all works there. Financially, I'm just a little more skeptical, right? I've worked. Myself and probably everybody else in this room has worked way too hard for the money that we've earned to fall victim to it and sort of throw it away. So I'm very discerning on where my money goes and what investments or where we put our money.
Clayton Wible, you have been a wonderful guest. Thank you so much. Thank you to our audience, to our hosts here at South Shore. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure to being part of this series. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, I'm Mark Siegriest. Take care now.